involving the shaping, the adaptation, and the change of the brain is fundamentally what we need to focus on. And that's going to be the main topic going forward. So I did this exact experiment with a group of people in society. And I think that it was absolutely phenomenal to see the different responses that people have when being asked, what does neuroplasticity mean? So I asked them, what do you think neuroplasticity is? What area of life do you think you've used it? What do you like about the concept of neuroplasticity? And if you could create an ability versus a skill, what would it be? And what's important to identify here is that an ability is something that we have inherently. So an ability is something you are born with, and a skill is something that is learned and developed. So if you could create an ability or a skill, which one would you prefer to have, and what type of skill or ability would it be? Have you ever read or watched something that is an example of neuroplasticity? So when facing someone who's an accountant, this was their response. They said, I think that neuroplasticity has something to do with the brain's ability or the process in which it learns. I'm sure that I would have used neuroplasticity when I learned how to ride a bike when I was young, and more recently when I studied for a test or exam. I would have loved to have had the ability of neuroplasticity. I would use it to be better at football. I don't think I have it. So quite interesting how the accountant's experience of neuroplasticity was largely academic and more physical when they were younger. And then as they got older, kind of thought it would be great if they still had this ability of neuroplasticity. When I looked at an analyst, they said that their interaction with neuroplasticity was recalled through watching a movie at IMAX. It was based on a study of how the cyclists at the Tour de France became so good. It was based on the neutrality of the brain, right from when the person is born all the way to becoming a professional cyclist. So having a look at the way the brain was shaped over the career and lifespan of a professional cyclist. When talking to a public relations officer, what is neuroplasticity? The change, the manipulation or shaping of the brain's activity. It's used in many areas, from education to learning a new skill. It's a positive concept. There is always hope that the brain has the ability to be revived, developed, or changed to better someone's life. It is self-sustained and controlled unless medical interference occurs, such as a stroke. A skill was selected when deciding between a skill and an ability because they said they're more likely to use a skill than an ability. A skill is something that you have developed or gained and earned, and you are more likely to retain it for a longer duration. The interaction that this person had had with neuroplasticity was through a family member who had had a stroke, and they did some research to discover how the brain recovers and the different exercises that can be used to stimulate this activity. Listening to a group of 15-year-olds that I had kind of approached with these questions, and they were kind of bouncing back in their dialogue saying, isn't that the brain? Like water on the brain? No, plastic, as if your brain can't bend. They then disagreed with each other. No, your brain can bend, but not bend, but bend as in push the limits. So pushing and bending those limits. And these last few are my favorites. A particular para-athlete with Down syndrome said it's the music in our ears that goes to our brain. It's got something to do with speed, as if you go over the speed limit and then burst into hysterical laughter. I thought that was absolutely a beautiful description of neuroplasticity. And probably the most insightful description of neuroplasticity out of every single person I've spoken to was an 11-year-old swimmer who said something to do with your brain, something in your head, but not to do with thinking that much. It can be your personality, learning by like repeating. To know when to speed up and slow down, to remember to do something. It makes you move, it controls everything. It sends a message to everything in your body without realizing it's remembered. And the example that was given was, I'm going to do front crawl, and you just do it. But if I'm honest, I don't really know, I'm only 11. And I thought that it was quite ironic because this is such an apt description of neuroplasticity.